So, good evening, everybody. Once again, we are back with this Civil's Daily Initiative of Daily Answer Wars, Day 7, and this is the evening session. So, again, today in the morning, we had given you a question, and it was a simple question, but a very important topic from International Relations GS Paper 2 point of view. And we have got very good responses. Many guys have written the answers, and I have gone through many of the answers. And once again, we will try to understand how to write the answer and how the exam get into the mindset of the examiner and understand how the evaluation process works and how to improve our answers. So again, this video will first try to form the basic framework of the answer, and then by that time you can ask your doubts in the comment section, and I'll try to address those doubts, and then we'll move to the evaluation and feedback thing. So the question was pretty simple today, guys. India-US relationship is a strategic partnership based on convergence of interests and shared value. A partnership mature enough to accommodate divergence in worldview of both the countries. So we had to discuss about this. So this question was actually asking both sides of this India-US partnership. The first thing that was mentioned was the partnership is based on convergence of interests and shared value. So you had to show in the answer that how the interests are converging and which shared values we are sharing in this partnership. And next part, there it was given that we had to accommodate divergence in worldview. So how this divergence in worldview was there, this had also to be shown. So you had to write 3-4 points about the areas of differences in this India-US partnership. And after that, you can just you could have just talked about how we are trying to overcome this divergence, and then you could have concluded in very like simple words with maximum 30-40 words. And so let us first get into the content of the answer and see what we all could have written in this answer. So I have just framed a basic decent answer, like which all points were necessary in this answer. This is not exactly a model answer, but this will give you an idea of what all was to be written in this answer. Good evening, Vikalp. So now let us start with this introduction part. Again, we'll move in that parameter only: introduction, body, and conclusion. So first of all, in introduction, we could have just started by giving out some facts. So facts could have been as simple as this, like India is the largest democracy and US, as you all know, is the oldest democracy. So this was a decent fact, and almost all of us knew this. So we could have mentioned this, that India and the US are the world's largest and oldest democracies, and they share a global strategic partnership. And both these countries also share a global strategic partnership. So this could have also been written. So in just one line, you are giving out two facts, and the introduction will be just crisp in finishing in one statement, as you had a lot of content, so we cannot enlarge or like write a longish introduction here. So after that, we could have moved to the body part, and in the body part we could have started by talking about the convergence of interests and shared value. Now guys, here you have to understand that we need to write on both these things, like which all interests are converging and what shared values are there. So you could have just started by talking about the convergence of interest. So here I will show you some points which you could have mentioned. First of all, recently in defense cooperation, India and US have done a lot of things. Like there have been many agreements that have been signed. For example, this LEMOA Logistics Exchange Memorandum Agreement, COMCASA Communications Compatibility and Security Agreement, BECA Basic Exchange Communication Agreement, and this Defense Trade and Technology Initiative. This was also signed to promote peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific. One thing I'll say, guys, here that you needed to mention these things. Just mentioning that we are partnering in defense won't cut it, because we had to give some examples also so that we could substantiate whatever we are saying. Next, we could move on to this clean energy thing. Again, both the countries have established a joint clean energy research and development center, JCERDC. So you could have mentioned this also. This has been designed to promote clean energy innovations. So this could have been written. After that, this is a very important point, like convergence in Indo-Pacific. As all of us know that China has been the aggressor in this region, and many countries have disputes, including India. And both India and US have similar rules-based order view of this region, and both of them are members of Quad. this quadrilateral security dialogue. So you could have mentioned this. This is a very important point for convergence. Then you could have talked about the civil nuclear deal which India and US signed after a lot of bickering actually, and also the civil space cooperation, high technology and space thing you could have added to show the technological partnership. You could have also mentioned this 2+2 dialogues that both the countries have like on an annual basis to bolster the mutual cooperation. Also in COVID-19, both India and US cooperated a lot to contain the effects of the pandemic, since both these countries were affected largely, like many deaths were reported in both these countries. So you could have also talked about this. Next, you could have also mentioned this climate action and finance mobilization dialogue. This is a dialogue which has been started between these two countries in matters of climate and environment. As both these countries lie on opposite ends of this climate finance spectrum, so this has been formed to reach at a midpoint and solve this issue. So you could have talked about this also. This is also shows the convergence of interests. Now, in terrorism also, both India and US have been affected by terrorism a lot. So both of these countries are working in this joint working group, US-India counterterrorism joint working group. So actually, you did not have to explain all of this. Just you could have mentioned this point and given this example, and that would have been decent enough if you were sort of space or time. So these were the convergence of interest part. What all convergence of interests are there between India and US? Next, in the question, it was also mentioned about shared values. So we both know we know that both these countries are mm, democratic countries. Like democracy is the principle in both these countries. So democracy, freedom, liberty, human rights. Both these countries are like uh, so convergence in these shared values. So you could have mentioned here these points. Also, there is a strong Indian diaspora in US. Like you can see that many Indian origin people are becoming CEOs and of the multinational companies in the US. So you could have also mentioned about strong people to people ties, which shows that there is a value sharing between both these countries. So this was basically, or you did not have to mention all these points. Even like if you had written 4 or 5 of these points, they should have been a sufficient to show that both these countries are converging in interests and have shared values. After this, you could have mentioned the divergences in the relations, like at which all points both these countries have different worldview. Again, this was very much in news in current affairs because there have been many issues, especially recently, where there have been divergence in India and US worldview, especially. So one of them is like this Ukraine crisis, Russia-Ukraine crisis, in which India has been like very cautiously walking, abstaining from any in the UNGA voting against Russia. India has always abstained, whereas US has been quite vocal against Russia. So that is shows the difference between the perspective of both these countries, how they see the issue. Also, you would have known that this AUKUS has been formed, a group of countries like Australia, UK, and US, UK, England, US, and Australia in the Indo-Pacific, and this shows that the Quad is diminishing in relevance as India has not been involved in this grouping. So you could have also talked about this AUKUS grouping. Next, you could have also mentioned about unilateral withdrawal of US from Afghanistan. Again, it was not very good step from Indian point of view because India was doing decently, like in humanistic support and all. But this withdrawal of US from Afghanistan has made India like in undecisive about what next policy to follow. So that could have also been mentioned because India was not involved too much in these negotiations between US and Taliban. Next, you could have also mentioned about this H1 visa issue. Like Indian IT professionals are denied this visa many times, and this is a very big concern. Especially, it was a lot in news like 2 3 years ago, especially in the Trump administration when he was doing those protectionist things against anti-immigrant policies. So you could have mentioned about this also. Next, you could have talked about the generalized system of preferences, a system in which India was getting benefits for its exports by the US, which has been again terminated by the US. Trump did this, so you can also mention about this divergences over trade and commerce. Just one example about GSP or the disputes in WTO, like India and US are most of the times found on the opposite ends of the spectrum. So you could have talked about this also. So these were basically the points of divergence of worldview which you could have mentioned. After that, you could have just gone for a way forward, a simple way forward. where you can talk about increasing military cooperation. As you all know that Russia has been a long-term partner of India, especially in military and defense. But now it is the time for India-US military cooperation to go to the next level, since Russia is hand in hand with China, and that can affect uh, India in times of need. So this military cooperation needs to be taken to a higher notch. So you can talk about this. Again, there are many issues where we can explore opportunities, for example, in climate change and technology. So you could have talked about this also, that exploring opportunities can also be done. Next, cooperation in security also is an important thing, as Indo-Pacific is an important ground of power show going forward. So India and US both need to cooperate against, especially China, Russia system of power. So you can talk about this cooperation in security. Then you could have just talked about some other issues such as space governance. Again, capabilities of Chinese army are increasing, and India needs technological and financial help from US to match that level. So space governance is also an area where India and US bilateral relationship can go forward. So these were the way forward which you could have mentioned. After that, you could have just simply concluded by talking about more need of more people to people ties. Rather than US adopting protectionist policies, US should encourage like Indian partnership and all. So you could have just written an optimistic, futuristic conclusion that as India and the US partnership grow closer, engaging in economic and strategic parameters, it calls for a deeper engagement that goes beyond government and entails strong people to people ties. So this was a simple conclusion which you could have added, and this was a basic decent framework of the answer. Acha, here one thing you could have changed is like in the question it was mentioned that a partnership mature enough to accommodate divergence of in worldview. So when you have written the divergence, after that you could have given some examples that how in recent times India and US have accommodated this divergence. So you could have talked about this accommodation in divergence. You could have mentioned about the new initiatives like I2U2. You could have talked about Quad. You could have talked about other areas like 2+2 dialogue, all of these things where it shows that both of these countries are moving forward in spite of the divergence in the worldview of both the countries. For example, you can also talk about the sanctions that US imposed on Russia but gave India go ahead, not go ahead exactly, but bypassed India. India was not affected by those sanctions, and India went on to purchase the S-400 defense system. So these things show that the partnership has matured enough to accommodate the divergence. So instead of way forward, you could have mentioned this also, that you can just mention that how the divergence has been accommodated in this relationship. So I think this was the basic framework of the answers, guys. And if you have any doubts, you can ask me in the chat box. Nisha, good evening. So after this, we will go for the evaluation part. Like I will show you how examiner try to get into the examiner's mindset and see how evaluation is done for these type of questions. So let us first pick up this copy. This is Tejaswi's copy, I guess. So in the first look, see the introduction is looking a bit long. So you need not write such a long introduction in the answers. Introduction should be very crisp. Try to finish it inside 30-35 words. So her introduction is: today the India-US bilateral cooperation is broad-based and multi-sectoral, covering trade and investment, defense and security, education, science and technology. Okay, so she has mentioned the areas of cooperation in the introduction itself. Again, I will say this was not needed because again, in this part, she has written areas of convergence. So again, these things will come here also. So you could have just given a simple introduction just about talking about oldest and largest democracy, or talking about the global strategic partnership. One basic difference. So I think you can write more examples here, like 2, 3 more examples can be used. You can also talk about defense exercises that both these countries participate in together. That also shows the convergence of interests. New 2+2 foreign and defense missiles, that this is fine. Tri-service military exercise. Okay, here again she has mentioned this tri-service military exercise but not given the names. So adding the names gives an impression that you have the knowledge. So you can try to incorporate that. Next part is Indo-Pacific counter. This is good. Here again you could have mentioned Quad. These two things could have been written in one point only, because the same thing you have written in 2 points. So overall, this part is fine. Again, here shared values part is not written. So you can here add like democracy, liberty, freedom, human rights. These are the common areas of shared values between India and US. So you could have added these points. After that, you have gone on to mention that India's refusal to stop buying Russian military equipment and its abstention on UN. Okay, again, this part could also have been written in point-wise format. All of this could have been mentioned in one point, that sanctions regime of US, and then US Ukraine Russia war, and the divergence of worldview between both the countries. So that would have made the presentation of this answer good, because at current state it seems like an essay. Also, there is no underlining and all, so the examiner will not bother to read all of these things. So if you just try to mention one or two points in point-wise format, that will be more presentable and visible to the examiner. So you can do that. Next, it is all about India, America's Indo-Pacific strategy, indigenous production. So she has concluded the answer here itself. So I think the content is also less for a 15 mark answer. In this answer, I think minimum 2.5 to 3 pages you should try to write for a 15 marker. Also, divergence part is not written, way forward is not written separately. So out of 15, I think 4 marks will be given for such an answer. So try to incorporate those things, like try to give the subheadings, try to formulate the subheadings from the uh, question itself. First part could have been just convergence of interests and shared values. Second part could have been divergence in worldview. Next part could have been how this divergence has been handled. And finally, you could have concluded. So, decent answer. Like, knowledge is pretty good, but I think the presentation and the content is a bit lacking in this answer. Next, we move to Saira's copy. PM said relation between the ideas are not just between two governments, but are people centric and people driven. For the most important, okay, this is a fine, decent introduction. Like, you have used the words of PM, so that is fine, and also substantial introduction. Area of cooperation is also fine. You have mentioned about DTTI and all of those things. Here also you can mention some examples. Trade relations are also fine. Energy is also good. COVID is also fine. Defense. I think Indo-Pacific could have been explained a bit more as a counterbalance to China. This is not sufficient, I think, because Indo-Pacific has been a very prominent issue in news and also in like current worldview. Way forward connectivity, US investing in India, Japan, proposed Asia. So again, this is also a decent answer here. Instead of way forward, you could have gone for showing the partnership that has issues that have been done by both the countries that have solved the issues, like the divergence, where the divergence of the worldview, how it has been tackled. You could have shown that. Like India has, you could have talked about sanctions and how India has still purchased the sanctions and defense from Russia and Iranian oil. All of those things could be written here. Still a decent answer, and I think it will you will get 4.5 out of 15 in such an answer. Also try to improve your handwriting a bit, and that will increase the presentation component of this answer. Otherwise, again, content is fine. Just a bit of presentation and like structuring of the answer can be a bit better. Like this how the divergence has been accommodated could have been shown by giving some examples. So this was Saira's copy. 4.5 out of 15 I'll give to this answer. Now let us move to Avi's copy. Usually this answer, his answers are very good. So let us see how he has presented this answer. Again, this is a very good introduction. As I told you guys, global strategic partnership, economic, cultural, defense, and bilateral. So this is very good. Natural allies. This also shows shared values. Converging interests is fine. You can guys use this type of flow charts. Just mention the points, and here you can just give the example like joint working group on counter terrorism, rules based world order. Here you can mention the Indo-Pacific quad thing. So these things could have been mentioned. Okay, you have written a separate section on growing partnership of India US. So it is fine. But I think these two parts could have been integrated, like growing partnership and converging interests. If the interests converge, then only partnership will grow. So shared values part is fine, but these two sections could have been combined. But nice use of flowchart, and also some examples are given like I2, U2 group, 5 eyes group, WASNR and DSRs. So these are very good things. Now see here, guys, he has shown like how this divergence has been accommodated. So this will give some bonus marks to this copy. Like divergence has been shown by this GSP thing, India-Russia relations. So as I told you guys, he has written about exemption from CATSA. India-Iran partnership has also been written. Afghanistan issue is missing here. You can mention this here, Avi. Way forward is also fine. Decent way forward. Energy, climate change, the building industry. Military cooperation and military and security cooperation could be talked about a bit more here. Enduring global partners of 21st century in Ukraine, South China Sea, India needs to scale up its engagement with the US while maintaining its strategic autonomy in relation with its historic ally Russia. So, okay, fine. No need to bring Russia in the conclusion here. Just try to give a futuristic presentation of how India and US partnership should move ahead. And I think that would be sufficient enough. But still, this is a very good answer, and I think you will get 6.5 out of 15 in this answer. Abhi. Next, we move to the Pali's copy. India US relation to strategic partnership. Okay. So she has also talked about global strategic partnership, and I think that is a good thing. So again, shared demo. So she has smartly used the question itself here to show that uh, driven by shared democratic values, convergence of interest. So this is also good. Convergence of interest is fine. Defense co. Talk about those defense agreements because US very hardly signs all those agreements with every country. So those agreements, quartet of those agreements, so that India US defense cooperation has moved on to a higher notch. So you can talk about those like Lemoa, Comcasa, those things you can mention here, Dipali. S&T space cooperation is fine. Combat terrorism is also fine. Climate change could have been mentioned here because climate change is a very emerging issue and it gives a different dimension to the answer. Shared values is also good. Some areas of divergence, Indo-Pacific. Indo-Pacific is not really an area of divergence between India and US. If you had to mention Indo-Pacific, you can talk about AUKUS group, which the recently Australia, US, and UK have formed. So that shows that Quad's importance is diminishing because the views of both India and US in Indo-Pacific is almost similar, like rules-based world order and all of those things. So you can avoid this point here. Russia-Ukraine war is fine. US-Pakistan reattachment is also fine. Climate targets are fixed according to like countries' capabilities. So that is not a point of divergence. Like instead of this, you can mention about Afghanistan issue, US withdrawal from Afghanistan. Way forward is also decent. So again, a good answer, but again, she has not shown the how to accommodate this divergence. That could have been written like 2 3 points could have been mentioned, just like Abhi had mentioned in his table. So that would have made this answer uh, go a notch higher, like a bit better. Still, I think this is a very neat and clean answer presented well, and I think 5.5 out of 15 is what Dipali should get for this answer. Next, let us move to Pooja's copy. So in introduction, she has talked about the defense relationship. Don't try to make the introduction more broad based. Like global strategic partnership is a more broad based thing. So that could have been mentioned. Defense relationship, you will have to talk in like a convergence of interest. So again, that will make you repeat your points. Otherwise, this first statement is fine. Like Pentagon's, just like Saira had mentioned about India's PM, this is also a fine quote. Shared interest is fine. Again, examples are missing here. You could have done the same thing that I said to Abhi, like you could have combined this both these sections, bilateral cooperation in India US shared interests. That would have made you avoid the need to write two sections and draw so much of things. Like when you talk about defense initiative, there only you can talk about these things. Still, there are a lot of examples. Defense relations pros cons. So what is you have not mentioned here the subheading, like what is this point number one? Here you can just mention a subheading like what you want to convey in this section. Because defense relationship cons are not asked exactly. You have to mention the overall divergence in worldview of both the countries. So that could have been mentioned in a better way. She has mentioned those things like here you can see that hostility towards other countries and all. So I think subheading can be put on this section about divergence of worldview. So again, this is very content rich answer. Many examples are mentioned, but structuring is a bit haywire. Like you can just go it section wise and make it more presentable. Like if you structure the answer well, examiner will know how you are seeing the whole issue holistically. Like how every process is clear in your mind. That will show it better. Otherwise, this answer shows that you have a lot of knowledge, but you have just uh, mentioned all of those things, whatever you could have in this answer. Way forward is fine, no need to quote here. Just you can just mention uh, what next should be done in your own words only, because it will be very hard for you to remember all of these quotes in the exam hall. So again, she had talked about enormous opportunities, strong Indo-US bilateral ties. So ठीक है, good answer, but I think structuring of this answer can be better. So Pooja, you will also get 4.5 out of this, out of 15, because although the content is pretty fine, but it does not, the flow of the answer is not according to the question. So you can make that better. Next, we move to Ritu's copy. Convergence of interest of India US. In introduction, she has just mentioned about examples of I2U2 West Quad Indo Pacific. So this is how the accommodation has been done. Like this part should be written in the latter part of the answer. In an introduction, you can just begin by saying, by talking about some historical perspective, or just talking about the democracies, both these democracies, because that is a very decent introduction. You can also talk about global strategic partnership. These initiatives show that both these countries are moving ahead in spite of their differences, and how they are still aligning and partnering in spite of many issues which are in the there in the relationship. Convergence part is fine. Certain hegemony, China, nuclear proliferation. This is not exactly a nuclear proliferation lemma. This is basically a defense initiative, like defense cooperation. So you can frame this point better. Multilateral relations and engagements. Try to mention some examples here. G20 is fine, but try to mention some newer initiatives, because G20 involves a lot of countries. Okay, so in this section, she has written uh, how the divergence has been accommodated, but what she has done is she has first mentioned the divergence and then given the solution also, like what solution both the countries have arrived at, that has also been mentioned. So you can use this approach also. This is good, but try to highlight, like try to underline this point so that the examiner knows that you have written both of these things. Otherwise, you can write two different subsections also. No harm in doing that. Funding mechanism is also fine. So this is a convergence of interests. Like this point can be avoided here. Both have congruence on China's stand. So here you are first talking about the divergence. So this point can be avoided here. This is fine difference in approach with respect to Russia. Okay, so in these 2 points, he has shown that how the divergence has been accommodated. So this is good. In both these countries, it has to be based on interest issue. resulting in successful. So fine, this is also a decent answer. Again, content rich, but very mix and match you have done. Like you have mentioned many points. Like in divergence, you have talked about congruence also. So try avoiding those things. Otherwise, decent answer. I think you will get 5 out of 15 in this mark in this answer. Introduction can be a bit better. Like this you can write in the latter part of the answer. Ritu. Next, we move to Pallab's copy. I think this is a different answer. Like Pallav has uploaded a different answer today. So let us move to Varsha's copy. Again, see guys, presentation of this answer needs to be improved because if you look at this answer, all of this is written in like an essay format. So try going for the format I just told you guys. Like go for a short and crisp introduction, and then go for some points by showing what interests are converging and what all shared values we share. She has also mentioned all of this: health crisis, economic post COVID-19, climate change. So these things can be mentioned in a point-wise format along with examples. Because if you don't do that, you will lose marks here. Again, a bit of rhetoric in this answer, as there is a shift from bipolar to unipolar to multipolar world. India needs to cooperate in all of these things. So these things can be written in conclusion, but not in like here in the body. You need to earlier only. So before this, until this point, it is seeming like the C has extended the introduction. So I think that can be avoided. Uh, just give a small introduction and talk about the cooperation, those converging of interests and shared values. Challenges are fine. So these two sections were the main things that you had to write: these challenges and cooperation. So basically, this was the main body of the answer. But in this answer, as you can see, like the main body has been shortened a bit, and extra things have been written. Rhetoric has been mentioned a bit more. Like everyone knows that we should cooperate on these issues, but you need to show your knowledge here, that you know what all things are being done and what all needs to be done. So you can write those things. Okay, in last part also, either you can write a way forward, or at least you can show write 2 3 points showing how the divergence has been tackled. That is also missing in this answer. So I think Varsa will get 3.5 out of 15 because there are a lot of issues in this answer, as I told you guys. Basically, you try to be more point wise, be more specific, include instead of writing long things that this can be done and that can be done, you can just mention what all has been done, exactly pinpoint those issues, and that would make for a better answer. Conclusion is decent. So I think 3.5 out of 15 is what Versa will get for this answer. So these were the answers that we checked today, and we showed you how the examiner goes through the answers. So try to be a bit more specific, guys. Overall, again, the good copies for today will be announced after this session, and you can enrich your notes with the points mentioned. Like you can see in Abhi's copy, there are many points which you can add in your notes. Like mention the examples he has mentioned, and that can enrich your word notes. So that will be it for today, guys. And I hope you guys are enjoying this answer writing practice. And again, we will meet tomorrow with day 8 of this daily answer box. We will again come with a new topic and try to take this forward, try to improve the way you write answers and the way you uh, feel confidence about writing answers. So thank you. Thank you very much, guys. And again, we'll meet tomorrow with a new topic and a new set of answers and show how these answers are getting evaluated. So thank you very much, guys.